Thank you for watching KTN News and welcome back to this second part of Planet Action as we continue having this discussion on climate change and associated diseases. Earlier I was having a conversation with Dr. Gitahi from AMREF, but now in studio with me I have Dr. Joseph Gishui, a public health specialist, as we have this same conversation. Karibu sana on the show as we have this conversation. Now, initially the doctor was talking about the diseases that are associated with climate change and what governments ought to do. He went deep on issues to do with stunted that we continue to face. But from your perspective as a practicing practitioner, what are some of the diseases that you continue to deal with on a daily basis?
So thank you very much, Dennis, for having me. So when you look at the effects of climate change on health, you have to look at them from a more diverse perspective. This is because climate change literally affects pretty much every organ system of the body. Say, for example, in the briefing earlier, you touched on mental health. Mental health is something that, once you look at, if you were to be quite critical about it, you'd see is one of the things that are actually going to be hardest hit. This is when you consider the effects of or the immediate and the immediate effects of climate change, which include the events, the adverse events like floods, droughts. All of this create certain issues with them. Like, for example, drought and the deaths that come with them that cause a certain form of PTSD and the depression that comes with that. Now we are actually having to coin new terms when it comes to mental health, such as eco-anxiety. Because it's a thing now, and it has to get its own disease categorization, and these are things we didn't have before. And now you look at it in terms of the elderly, where we are finding that changes in climate have been associated with dementia, for example, meaning that from one side, the elderly are affected, and from the other side, when it comes to newborns, you find that climate change and the change causes some reduction or the prevalence of preterm children and the mental challenges that come with that. So that's just one aspect. Now let's go to let's focus on communicable diseases. You find that cardiovascular diseases, for example, are due to the pollution that comes with climate change are going to go up. Currently, we are already facing a huge burden of cardiovascular diseases due to air pollution. It's estimated that they cause more deaths annually than HIV, something that we would not have considered before. And going forward, because the changes in climate are expected to increase or worsen the air pollution, we're expecting that those diseases would also increase. The respiratory diseases that come with that as well. The rates of asthma, for example, are meant to go up. You come and you look at diseases that affect the gastrointestinal system. So you find the infectious diseases that come with that, for example, cholera, the diarrheal diseases that come with that. Those are going to be a problem. And the appearance of another aspect that is now starting to crop up is that microbial resistance is also being very negatively affected by climate change. Why? Because the changes in the way the environment is now functioning due to climate change create a nice petri dish for bacteria and other microorganisms to survive. And what happens is that if there are too many in one place, they have to evolve. So that, and in the process of them evolving, they become resistant to the antimicrobials and the antibiotics that we have.
Now, Doc, as we have this conversation and all these issues that are associated with climate change, now it is even difficult for doctors right now to deal with malaria that we were doing very well in handling. And why is that the case right now?
So malaria, as most of us know, is caused by Plasmodium that is usually carried from one person to another by mosquitoes. Mosquitoes thrive in wet areas and in stagnant waters, right? For the one aspect, due to climate change and the changes in weather patterns, like you have flash floods here, rains unexpectedly there, we find that there are more breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Now, it makes it easier for malaria to be spread. That's on the one part. On the second part is that global warming is increasing the habitats for the mosquitoes, because in places which are cooler, like the highlands of Mount Kenya, we did not have. You wouldn't find the concentration of mosquitoes that you find increasing in the past decade or so. So those places were sort of protected from malaria. Nairobi being one of those areas that you would think are protected from malaria. But now, as temperatures come up, you find that mosquitoes can thrive here. That's another aspect. Now there's even a third aspect whereby because of one, climate change, which creates a nice environment for other species of mosquitoes to move in. So species that were only found in places like South Asia are starting to be seen here in Kenya. And these species, unfortunately, are very well adapted to living in the urban areas, meaning that they have created a nice domicile or a nice environment for mosquitoes, for malaria to be spread by these mosquitoes. So that's going to be a challenge. And to just add a bit of more drama to this whole thing is that mosquitoes don't simply spread malaria. There's some diseases that we are not very vulnerable to due to our climatic conditions, but then now that's going to change. You'll find the diseases like chikungunya and West Nile fever and other diseases that we thought were not going to be something to worry about will start impacting us in the near future because of climate change.
And now, Doc, as you've painted a picture of how things that we were handling very well are now becoming a problem because you're even seeing different species that are cropping up. But now with all this conversation on climate change and what we need to do, we know the president is big on matters to do with climate change. How important is conversation surrounding health in all these conversations? Because yes, we will plant trees, we will buy electric cars, we will do all these things, but how important and integral is the aspect of health in this entire conversation?
Well, let's just start with the words of the WHO. Climate change essentially is going to be, or is, the biggest health challenge of our century. That means it is integral in everything, in every conversation that where climate change is happening, health has to be somewhere, if not at the center, very close to it. Why? Because essentially before, now we used to think of climate change in academic terms, we were expecting it's something that is going to happen in the future. Up until very recently when it became very, abrasive or in your face. Like for example, just a couple of years back, the UK actually pronounced disclosed that they had the first case of a person who died due to air pollution as the cause of death. Before it was very theoretical that air pollution can kill. No, directly air pollution being a cause of death was theoretical before. Now, when you put a face to what we mean by climate change, it has to be the human face because it affects the health of a person is not just the absence of disease. It is the well-being of the person, the complete well-being, the emotional, spiritual, physical well-being, and psychological well-being. So now, when you look at climate change and the effects that it has on every aspect of life, one, when you talk about the food supply, food is directly connected to diseases and the lack of good health. You talk about the economic status of countries, the reduction of poor economic, basis creates for a more vulnerable population. Then you talk of the presence of infrastructure that could be affected, the floods and so on. For example, during COVID, it was made very clear and we became very aware that climate change would probably kill or cause more deaths due to malnutrition in urban centers and rural centers. Why? Because urban centers can produce food. If they were cut off because of flash floods and continuous floods, you have a problem. Then you talk of other aspects of productivity and how we understand or we relate with our environments, they are all essentially tied up with the human experience. And there is no human experience without health. So if you're having a conversation about human beings, them being alive has to be, really high up in that discourse.
Yet, when all these conversations about climate change happening right now, we are planning to go to COP28, COP27. The big conversation, especially from African countries, was to do with funding. We want to get money to be able to restore ecosystems. Those who've destroyed their ecosystem to be able to pay more and all that. But is there any text that is big on we need this money to be able to improve on the health of our people? And if not, should these then be one of the key subjects that when we go to COP28, even the Africa Climate Summit that happened in Nairobi, some of the texts that we go with then to COP28 in Dubai be majorly based on the need to restore our ecosystems and all these so that we can improve on our health?
Yes, so that's a very good point you brought up, because essentially before, the discourse of climate change was about economic aspects of it, and it caused the hunger and the loss of jobs, and that was the angle with which it was being looked at. But now the discourse has to change, has started to change. At least now we are finding that actors in the ministries of health are actually being called to the table. Before, they were not even they're not party to those discussions. We're seeing that changing. We're seeing that some countries are actually putting aside some funds primarily for the effects of climate change on health. And so yes, that is an avenue, and also with the idea that we can pull funds from every single ministry or avenue with which pulling can be done will help in every way, because unlike initially when we were theorizing about climate change, we realized it was put in just one aspect of health. It's a social determinant among the other five. There are many, but major five social determinants of health. Only now is it becoming very clear that it is the primary social determinant of health, because when climate change happens, the other social determinants of health will include access to education, access to healthcare. You realize that climate change will affect every single one of us. So if we do not consider it as a very huge influential factor in people's health, then you will find that the creation of wealth and its losses will be just about at par. Because right now we are already losing about $200 billion, more than $200 billion as Africa just by itself. And the idea that it's not an us problem, it is thoroughly an us problem, because we bear the brunt. We produce less than 4% of the greenhouse emissions that we're talking about, but 89% of the effects are felt by us. We constitute 17 of the countries, of the top 20 countries that are worst hit by this change. So it's not and then the other thing about climate change and health is that unlike some other things that you would say are individual, this one doesn't work that way. Like, climate change will influence your cardiovascular system, meaning that it will cause things like strokes and heart attacks to you just because somebody else did something elsewhere. Your neighbor is there messing up the environment. He doesn't see it as a problem, but you're the one who's suffering these consequences. There's no way that it's not like, unlike before, when you wake up in the morning, you jog, you eat well, life should treat you just as well. No, this is an us problem, it's an everyone problem. As long as you're not doing your part, you're going to suffer more, unfortunately, because of the inequities that we have in the way the world is. But it doesn't mean that because you did less, yes. It's not fair.
Yes.
It's not fair that way.
And on that specific note, then, how do we make this conversation to be all inclusive? Because you have to play your role, I have to play my role. Whatever happens in Uganda directly affects Kenya in one way or the other. Like rightfully you've said, Kenya emits, Africa as a whole emits less than 4%, but we are suffering from the biggest brunt of what others have done. So then how do we change this conversation from being about you need to pay for loss and damages and give it a human face, so that even when we are talking, we're not talking in terms of give me your dollars to be able to plant trees, but I want these dollars because look at how my people are, and I'm not bringing my people on the table as a bargaining tool, but as the people who are suffering and who need the assistance and help that they require.
One of the avenues I would suggest is educating people on exactly what it means for the cost of not caring. Because what we as Africa currently bring to the world and our assets that we get paid for is the food basket. You know, the food basket is what we offer the world, and in turn we get what the world offers, well, what the world has to offer us. We change this for the other. So if we cannot produce food, that means you cannot survive. The Africans, there's nothing, very few countries will survive this, you know, with the exceptions of those ones that have natural resources. The rest of Africa struggles. So when it becomes that it's not the idea of separation of socio-economic consequences from health, that paradigm has to shift. It has to be health is a consequence and a driver of socio-economic progress. You know, so the moment you change the discourse to it being integrated to every health being in an integral part of every aspect of life, then the discourse changes from schools, from the way you interact with discourse or conversations. When health becomes an intricate part, not because I'm happy that we've moved from a place where we're all fighting for mere survival, you know, from when infectious diseases we're dying, so we treat them. Now we're looking at a place where if we don't nurture health, we realize that trying to get it back in terms of treatment is too expensive, and most often than not doesn't work for our conditions.
And you see, Doc, as we speak on this now, we realize that climate change has seen our produce go down. Whatever we harvest has gone down. And with this, you find that there is a group of children that you're bringing up that will be stunted. That is according to research. Even Dr. Gidinji from AMREF was alluded to that as well. So as knowing that this is what is happening, there will be a certain generation of people who are stunted, whose growth have been affected because of malnutrition moving forward. As Africans, as government of Kenya, let me talk about the government of Kenya. As government of Kenya, how important is it for us to have school feeding programs?
That's for example, one of the things that you cannot educate somebody who's hungry, and secondly, you cannot expect them to thrive in society if they don't have the energy to participate fully in society. That's something that's quite integral. It's what you're asking is about creating resilience, and not just resilience from a healthcare perspective, right? No, it's resilience economically, because climate change is not something that should be that is a problem. You know, we're supposed to be able to adapt with it. Some scientists or science already has it there. You see, what we are seeing now is a consequence. We are in between the interglacial period. Interglacial being that every 100 or so thousand years we have the ice age that crops up. The world tilts in a different axis and becomes too cold, and everything freezes. And for us human beings to survive, global warming is a good thing, or was a good thing, that allowed for the ice age to subside, and the human beings were able to create environments and prosper. So warming and cooling of the world are supposed to be kept at a pace which is sustainable, or we become resilient to those changes. Because as I think Gedenji pointed out earlier, the idea that we're not going to get to more than 1.5 degrees centigrade Celsius that we are so afraid of is a foregone. We're way past that. It's about creating systems and creating resilience as us, and adapting to the changes that are going to happen. Because as we are saying, if it's cyclic, then as much as this is a crisis now, very soon we will be talking about it's cooling too fast. Now we have to adapt to that. So it's about how do we create systems that allow us to thrive in our environment. Yeah.
And Doc, finally, I would bring you to this conversation that we've many have looked at this conversation on climate change as us versus them conversation. You destroyed the environment, we did not play any role in that, therefore you should pay for that. But understanding that now we are in the 28th COP, it has not worked for the past 27 COPs. So therefore, how do we change these conversations so that it is not the global West versus the global South conversation, but a conversation that people come on the table to find solutions, whether it's in Africa, it's in Kenya, in the United States, or in Australia. We sit down to find a common ground moving forward.
I believe it's behavioral change and a change in the way we as Africans own our world. You know, as long as you're delegating your existence to somebody who's wronged you, then you're not in control. You've been wronged, yes. Should somebody pay for the wrongs? Probably. But are you going to die because of the fact that you've been wronged? That's not. Chopping off your nose to spite your face doesn't get you there. And clearly, waiting for the world to get just is going to take a minute. We have not seen any reason why the offenders or the perpetrators of offenses against the African and the global South, we haven't seen them being held to account, and we have repeatedly behaved in a way that we are expecting them to be held to account.
Is it by design that they're not held to account, or is it because they control the coffers?
I don't think that is probably a distinction of degree rather than of kind. If you control the coffers, then you design everything. And if you design everything, then you protect yourself. So, the game is rigged from the get. But if you own your existence, that means that being rigged or not, you control the space around you. So if you want to thrive, and if you want your children not to be stunted, not to be preterm, you want to live to an age where you can enjoy or at least have a good life, you produce food. Make sure you produce the most of it so that you can create a social economic environment that makes you happy. Stop relying on somebody else to fix the only thing. You're just yielding more of your power, and what you're getting in return is abuse. Stop yielding the power. Take it back. Start that discourse. Let's not look outside. Let's look inwards, and then we produce. You guys take. We'll figure out the rest as long as we are having a discussion at a level, not an inferior one from you, but we're sitting at the table as equals.
And finally, Dr., what would be your advice to whoever is watching this show right now, to them with regard to climate change and what we all must do? Because like you said, I might be walking on the road and I drop down because I've inhaled a lot of fumes. So then what should we all do, putting a human face on this conversation?
I think, and I believe actually, that climate change is about us changing with it. We have to change. We have to be the ones who are proactive in ensuring that, as much as it's going to, the problem that we are facing currently is because the change is too drastic and it's too fast. We need to, as much as possible, slow down that time so we as evolving species and as evolving communities can catch up. We can make our communities more resilient. And that starts with you and I, ensuring that whatever you dispose, how you use resources is in a way that is environmental friendly. We don't always have to bring out our cars at the beginning of the month because you can afford fuel. That's not really necessary. And we don't have to buy plastic bottles and toss them out. You buy one bottle that you can carry around for the whole month. That's not necessary. You don't have to use, as much as you're reducing plastic bags per se, we have just kind of tilted the use of plastics to other things, which we essentially previously had them as metals, and we could recycle them, but now we just are using plastics everywhere. You don't have to eat meat every day. That's one of those things that people don't want to talk about, but it's a huge aspect of it because of the way meat is processed and foods are processed. It's very dangerous for the environment. So it's listening, it's paying attention, and it's also teaching your neighbor on and giving them advice on what you know to make our environment as a community
a better place.
A better place.
That is Dr. Joseph Gishui, public health specialist. Earlier, I had Dr. Gitai Gidinji from AMREF, that is the CEO of AMREF, as we have this discussion on climate change, the diseases associated, and what all of us should do to be able to save this planet and ourselves, because we're giving this entire conversation the human face. Malaria affects you. Diarrhea is all about you. COVID-19 is all about you. Therefore, it's all of us to come on the table and have this conversation. My name is Dennis Aseto. This has been Planet Action. Next week, Purity Muse will be taking the reins and offer you what she'll be having then. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Eric Latif will be coming here with KTN Prime News. Good evening.